this is special, and the word magic is just run through everything and every conversation. And I also like to throw out this idea of the proximity of luck in the working. Nicole and I, we met just right before the pandemic, 2019, 2020, and before everything shut down. And when I saw that she was on the program, I was like, yo, I love the proximity, right? The idea of those moments and the magic, and deem itself, the word, the idea to just deem it so, to believe. And that is very much the beginning of this conversation of what does it mean with Black beauty, and particularly talking about everyone's story. So what I'd love to do is just jump in, because we know we go. We've had some conversations.
Yeah.
We have.
And give us a little bit about just your background, a little information about you, but then also couple it in with just your experience through life as a child, of what beauty was to you, and what do we remember about those things of grandma's house, the magic that we would do. Everybody has these chicken sandwiches now. I was just talking about it. Everywhere you go is a chicken sandwich company, Raising Cane. Like, grandma made magic, and I don't know what she was using or what she was putting in it, but Raising Cane ain't got nothing on our grandmas. So give me a little bit of your first, Cheryl, and about your story, how you got here, and a little bit about where you grew up.
First of all, I love the proximity of magic and design. Magic is by design, and design is magic. And so having Nicole here to tie those two things together was superbly brilliant. I grew up in the North. My parents came from the South. They're from a little town in Kentucky, close to Nashville, Tennessee. And Black folks are amazing at creating beauty out of what's left over. My grandmother was a domestic, even though she was a trained nurse. And so in the 30s and 40s, Black hands couldn't touch white bodies to heal them, but they could certainly clean for them and do everything else.
Yes.
And so my grandmother was a midwife for the community and delivered babies, and would come home tired. And the front room of my grandmother's house had the good sofa.
Yes. Yes.
And you never sat
That's right.
on a good sofa. And it was covered in plastic.
Yes.
And as a 3-year-old, I remember, I thought plastic was beautiful.
Right.
And I wanted a plastic skirt and a plastic dress and a little plastic cape. And my grandmother made me a little plastic outfit. Now, I didn't know that was bad. And I was always a slightly chunky child, and so my plastic would make noise when I wore my plastic outfit. And she would just say, "Baby, that's beautiful."
Yeah.
And so the vision of this shiny surface that then soon enveloped my body and became what I thought was a beautiful ensemble. For me, that was one of the first instances that I saw and felt beauty. And y'all know how plastic sticks to your body. And I always thought that's what beauty should do. It should stick to you. It should travel with you. It should move with you. It should morph to your form.
That's true. Yeah, 100%.
Dawn, what about you? What's the beginning of beauty?
I actually grew up right here on the south side of Chicago. Actually, my mom's first home was literally around the corner from here. And it's really great. I love this gallery for a number of reasons. But my first solo show was here. So wrapped around the block, and here I go 47 years later. But my grandmother was from Mississippi. And what I remember most about Bronzeville was, as a young boy, I could make upwards of $3 to $4 at the Moo and Oink carrying people's groceries, and that was beautiful for me at the time. These kind of relationships were easy to navigate in a community that felt warm, that felt, a number of mothers were responsible for the children. And I think that kind of beauty made me feel good. And I could tell when a lot of that started to change as a teen. But that...
How was the expression? And so, one thing that New was joking about, I do always make sure that Deem looks good and everything, because I really believe that evidence is so important, right? And so people ask me, why do we have a journal? Why isn't it just online? Because Black evidence has to be physical.
Yeah, 100%.
And so give me a sense of where were you through your growth starting to understand the evidence of beauty in your life?
That's warm. Again, I think, growing up in Bronzeville, my mom moved around a lot, but I always had this keen sense of support throughout that time. And I think, rather it be, I know I'm going to the club tonight, but I got this support that's coming from a number of pillars in my community that would say, oh yeah, Ma, I just saw him going down the street. He should be back in a bit. This kind of support that I had was a brotherly support. I think that's what I'm reaching for. This kind of growing up, manhood, feeling good. And then I learned to use a pencil. And I actually started to get paid from drawings that I would do as a young boy. And so all of these kind of manifesting moments in my life, going through ways in which I can start to use particular talents, but also getting support from a number of angles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that beauty is sometimes manifested in the things we keep. And as human beings, we are natural collectors. And so thinking about the things you array around you, whether they're books or photos. I remember going to the cemetery with my grandparents and seeing stones, small stones, pebbles on headstones. And I thought that was beautiful. And my grandmother said, everywhere you go from here, find a stone, keep a stone. And I started collecting rocks. And they're beautiful. They have beautiful colors and beautiful shapes. And they feel good in your hand. As a child, I was a profound stutterer. And my grandmother said, put a stone in your hand every time you want to talk. Think about the stone and don't worry about what's coming out of your mouth.
Yeah.
I never went to a speech therapist. My grandparents didn't, there's no such thing as speech therapists in the 60s in our community.
Right.
My parents were very educated, learned people, but they also they relied on their roots. And so they used that same technique and they said, hold a stone. And that is how I started working through my stuttering. And so to me, a rock, a stone is symbolic of overcoming something. It's got heft and weight, and it means something when it's in the palm of my hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's these things, these rituals, these moments that we create to find places for us to settle. We were having a conversation, and I'll check the audience. There's some age-specific questions, but in growing up in a Black home,
You're good.
there were certain things that were pretty consistent of what it meant to be home and to feel safe. And I threw it out there and said, for many of us, there were usually 3 pictures on a wall, sometimes usually right by the door when you were walking out. There were things like plastic. There was the room, the good room or the room you're in trouble, because you need to go sit there in grandma's house. But how many of you remember what those 2 or 3 photos were at your house? You got it. Look at love. All of us. I mean, we're all from somewhere, but those were the 3 photos.
In every house.
Every house.
Yeah.
So there was this interesting consistency around Black beauty or expression of home and safety that we could not always find outside those doors. But there was a certain level of expectation in regards to how we start to create our own safe space. So talk a little bit about the balance of safe space and beauty and what that has mean in regards to your work and the way that you see it.
Comfort and safety live in the same, very near one another in our brains, in our ancient brain. So where we recognize comfort and where we see safety, according to neuroscientists, have proximity. And they also have proximity to beauty. And so the recognition of beauty is akin to comfort and safety. And so think about the place or places where you have felt safe, where you have felt comfortable. It's almost a certainty that something in that space also communicates beauty to you.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely, I'm gonna agree 100% that comfort is kind of going back to community again, being able to be in a home around family, which we just celebrated a Mother's Day. I think growing up for me, it was the bosom of grandmother's home, which is where all of us lived. I grew up in a big family, but a small apartment. And most of us cherished being home, the home-cooked meal, rather that was leftovers from the night before. But I think that warmth leads a lot of the practice that I do in the work I do today. I'm trying to bring this particular language that I don't get to see very often in the work, particularly in this contemporary world of design. And so bringing what I felt at home to the work that I do today is crucially important.
And you're right, language is so important. And, growing up, another moment of the past, and we'll get to the future soon, people. But when I was younger, it was the 3 words that my father made sure that I knew how to say. I don't know if many of you remember those words, but it was always, Black is beautiful. Sure. Right? And he wanted to make sure that when I go out, I understood those words. Mm-hmm. I didn't know exactly what Black is beautiful was at 4, 5, 6 years old. I knew that I had to carry a certain level of pride. But what does Black is beautiful mean to you, to both of you? I told you we were going in. Having conversation.
Black is beautiful means, again, I'm going to start with comfort. But I think what we hear deemed a lot today is Black space, Black joy. And for me, being in the comfort of this, in a setting like this, I also have to say that I walk into a space like, I'm going to say virtue. And I go into this room and I see a series of people, first of all, just a room full of people, but the comfort of seeing Black smiles, the comfort of seeing Black folks just taking a meal and laughing, that setting for me is a really beautiful thing to experience. I'll go to Bronzeville Winery, where it's even more beauty because I had a hand in it. And there's this incentive of knowing that I designed a seat that a number of asses will take place in amongst a beautiful meal, and know that I had a part of that. There's nothing better.
Black is beautiful. How about Cheryl? What is Black? Black is beautiful.
I think very akin to what Norman just said. seeing expressions of joy and happiness, seeing the collective. I love the word community, but I think sometimes for Black folks, we feel something beyond a level of community, and that's kinship. There is a recognition. It's that whether you're 14 or 60, if you're someplace, you're at O'Hare and you see another Black person walk by and you do the, or you're in Salt Lake City where there might not be any other Black folks around, but ironically you're on Rosa Parks Boulevard and you see somebody else Black, you just kind of like, so there's that, I see you, I am you, I'm with you, and so just that very deep kinship. But it happens with white folks too, because sometimes I've gotten that Black nod from a white person. So,
Sure.
you know, but it's that connectivity,
That's the word, Cheryl.
it's that
Connectivity.
thin silver thread that connects us as human beings.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as creatives and as designers, we understand that beauty is a process. And I think that sometimes we don't always understand the process of beauty and that it takes time, whether it's flowers. We're in the springtime now and we're starting to see flowers bud, and there's a patience of what that looks like. And
Especially here in Chicago.
Yes, exactly. And there's also this idea around privilege where contemplation is a privilege. It really is. There's times where if I'm traveling around the world, and we were in Venice together last year, which was fun, and I'm looking around, I'm like, wow, someone had the time to get to these details. And for us, we're in many ways, brown and Black folks, we're always responding and reacting. We don't always have the space for contemplation. We're always being pushed and forced. So when it comes to our creative process, whether it's music, art, design, making, how do you both think about finding those moments of contemplation to get through the process, to get to the depth of beauty that you really want, that you desire, that's in here?
I was thinking what you were saying about seeing folks at virtue, right? They were bodies at rest. And I think about how many times, and even if you're sitting here right now, and you realize your shoulders are clenched, your molars, your jaw is clenched, we unintentionally spend more time clenched than at rest. And when we see people at play, when we see a body at rest, that actually has a calming effect on us. And so if you've ever walked through a park and see somebody kind of laid out with their feet up, like, oh, I want to do that, but that's not you. All of a sudden your body is like that. And Nicole not only worked magic with her hands, so much of what she said was poetry, and the phrase that she used is sometimes we have to believe something before we see it.
Yeah.
And that belief of making rest real, safety real, comfort real, we have to see sometimes before, we have to believe in beauty before we often recognize it. And I think the recognition of beauty is very critical, for those of us who are in communities that are under assault.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you lose the ability to believe in beauty, then you will lose the beauty. And so staying astute and vigilant, that beauty saves lives. Beauty requires us and causes us to act differently. Beauty is causal. If you live around chaos and brutality, your body will respond to chaos and brutality in all kinds of ways, right? Sickness, worry, stress. And so give yourself over to believing in beauty.
And there's conflict and back and forth.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to keep building. I'm going to flip to you.
Yeah.
But Black joy, if you're talking about Black joy, I think the most powerful photo of Dr. King that is one of my favorites is actually of Dr. King in the swimming pool. His kids. It's probably the scariest photo for this country. Because it actually represents the photo of where he was trying to get to. Not on the stage, not marching, but being relaxed and free. Black joy. My friend Derek Adams, he talks about that a lot.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about black joy. But there's the other side of that where we know that, man, we get to that place.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, I think there's a really beautiful thing that's happening today with black rest, black relaxation. And I'm starting to see it. No, I'm not starting. I'm seeing a lot of it in the artwork that we are viewing today. And I think it's pushing this
What does that look
new
like?
visual.
What is that looking like?
That
Yeah.
I feel like it's pushing the limits of those imaginations that we're talking about. I feel like because there's this, well, I think a number of ways in which we are organizing to support one another in the battle or the movement. I feel like a lot of that is transpiring in the ways in which we're expressing one another. We're expressing our artwork. So that then impresses upon others to imagine bigger. People want to be artists now. People didn't really want to be artists 10, 15 years ago, but that's a viable way to spend your life now.
Yeah.
And so it's really rich kind of watching that black joy be a supporting agent to black life.
Yeah.
Because, growing up in the south side of Chicago, there are tons and tons of negatives that we could focus on. But that black joy and imagination is pushing
In that
narratives.
that joy piece, Kadeem Hardison, who was on
Yeah.
Different World, his mother, Beth Ann Hardison, was one of the earliest black models and one of the earliest people to own a modeling agency. And the black aesthetic around photography and modeling and black folks in ads, when you would see them, unless it was in Jet or Ebony, but it was for black folks not to smile, right? A very stoic
Always the next.
face. It was very rare that you would see a photo of Martin or Coretta with a smile. So when we did see photos of them with a smile on their face, it was, right? It was revelatory. The entertainers that they surrounded themselves with, Sidney Poitier and Harry Belafonte, because they were entertainers, there was almost a license that they could smile, but then the perspective was, but they're acting. And so the pornography around black suffering is there often were photos, people are prone to show photos of black folks suffering, right?
Yeah.
That's suffer porn.
The anti-Frederick Douglass.
Exactly.
Let the man be photographed.
Right.
And that is systematically, I feel like we now have a lot more control thanks to social media. I can share and organize in a couple of hours and meet up with, 100 people somewhere and photograph that moment. And now there's.
Yeah. Black joy is revolutionary.
Organization. Yeah.
Because it was thought that if we saw black folks smile, then we're not making them suffer enough.
Right.
Like it literally in the Jim Crow South, it was discouraged unless we were putting on a show or we were doing something from an entertainment. So how is a black smile dangerous? But showing us as the antithesis of joy was the preferred way to show us.
So let's jump ahead into now and Black Futures. A lot of what we talk about with our work, and what are some of those moments that we're carrying forward in regards to Black joy and Black beauty? Does it still show up in ways that allow us to have a language around it? I think we've gotten to a place where social media and other outlets and music has been so disseminated where everything is almost like watered down. It's like it's really hard to find a deeper essence. Give me a sense of when we talk about Black beauty and what that looks like, what is Black Futures of Black beauty
Well, I think the portraits of Barack Obama and Michelle Obama that hang in the National Portrait Gallery, they are smiling.
Okay.
They were told not to smile, but they are smiling. Yeah, in the painting.
Right.
Yeah.
So are you seeing it as there are new expressions of our joy that's elevating the idea of Black beauty?
Yeah. And there were photographs during Black Lives Matter, and it was far easier to photograph folks looking angry, but a lot of people were smiling while they were marching.
And I think the record doesn't have to show the smile, but I think that the record needs to show progression. And I think the progression brings about the smiles. And I think Black futures are, it's very weird because I'm actually playing with a bunch of AI work right now to help think about moments where James Baldwin might have been a designer for Bauhaus in the 1960s. What would that chair then look like? You know what I mean? And Parliament Funkadelic is designing, lamps. So what does that look like for Bauhaus in the 1960s? And so I think that the beauty of what's happening today is this great deal of imagination. And it's not a fake word. I think people are actually living by working towards those imaginations. And if yeah, I'm going to stop there.
No,
I think that's...
And so I'm going to build off of that. I'm going to ask a bit of a tougher question. Does Black beauty and joy lead to liberation? Does Black beauty and joy, and where we're really trying to go with these expressions of joy,
big.
does it lead to liberation?
Only if we're not just doing it for ourselves. But I think the liberation comes through the touching, the collaborations, the each one teach one, all the things that our parents taught us. If that's not a part of the system that we're working for, it could fall short. Yeah.
And joy and laughter, which sounds ironic, but I think are required in any revolution. You can't see yourself smile unless you're looking in a mirror. But you can see your smile reflected in the face of someone who's looking at you. Smile and laughter is contagious. Revolution is contagious. Revolution requires both joy and anger. So
Absolutely.
I think that reflection of ourselves in the face of other activists, warriors, we are all reflections of one another, and that you can feel yourself smile, you can feel yourself be angry, but it's like when I look at your face and you're responding to me, I know what my face is doing.
Right.
Thus that expression, fix your face, right?
Yes.
Yes.
It's real.
Yes. No.
I think platforms like a Deem, like a Rebuild, and I'm going to talk real close, cyber closely, like a Rebuild Foundation, like an MCA and a Southside Community Arts Center. Like, if we don't continue these realms of the ways in which we work, I think that we could fall short of, or
Absolutely.
it could take a while longer.
Yeah.
We can get there.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but the Black magic. She's the only Black magician. It's scary. It's ridiculous. We need more. Because in many ways, the other place where we used to find laughter is under attack, and we no longer have it the way that we used to have it, and that's with our Black comedians.
Yeah.
And it's changed.
No, we used to have
We don't have it. And if we would have had a Black comedian opened up, we would all be like, oh my God, okay, what is he going or she going to or they going to say?
Yeah. Yeah.
that isn't going to offend or hurt or change somebody in ways that's uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And now language and ability to laugh, in some ways, has become really difficult.
Or coded. And I
Coded.
wonder in this period that we're living in and knowing what might be headed toward us in November, are we going to have to take our joy underground? Are we going to have to, I don't know if it means mask our joy, but are we going to have to signal our joy in other ways,
Well, that's
the
what-
way the ancestors did?
Well, we need our artists, and I guess this is where we've over-indexed in certain areas. I'm not saying we have too many comedians. I am saying we do need more Black magicians,
Yes.
Black women magicians, Black people magicians, right? And we need more artists. We need more artists expressing, because there is places to laugh. We laughed with Nicole. It was the first time I've been able to laugh with someone who's performing something without me thinking about what's the next laugh. Is it gonna hit? She kept us laughing. We need new places to learn how to laugh.
Interesting.
And this is where we go back to Black beauty and Black joy. How, you were saying in the art world, where are other expressions that you feel can be elevated?
Well, I think theater is a lack in
Theater,
Black communities.
the Black theater,
I think
yeah.
this is what we unfortunately these were forms of entertainment. That's another thing I remember when growing up around here. There were jazz clubs. You could easily walk into performances, and I think that kind of thing we really lack, particularly on the south and west sides of Chicago. I could also say. Yeah, I don't know if there's a comedy club. There might be one in Chicago, which performs one Friday out of the month or something like that. I don't see a lot of laughter throughout the neighborhood. So definitely one of those we can use. Help me out, Cheryl.
Well, and I think the joy of making things, makers have a subversive sense of beauty. They're crafting things that are functional, but the motion, action of making
Therapy.
is joyful, and it is very much therapy. And so this idea that there are all kinds of things we need to be. We need to be financially literate. We should be more design literate. I think we need to be more beauty literate too, and recognizing that beauty isn't always these big major gestures. Sometimes it's the way that this chair looks in this space, or objects look in a space. Functionality is beauty. You see a beautiful glass, or you hold something in your hand and it feels good in your hand. Because we owe it to the next generation, because again, they have to believe it sometimes before they see it. And so we need to help younger folks believe in beauty, because they may not be seeing it every day.
100.
Yeah. And so we're going to land it here in a moment. And what I would love is again, thinking about what you're saying is passing that baton, or what I was talking about, create the conditions to be surprised. So, what are those conditions that the next generation that may not always have the tools, the language? We don't have grandmom's homes the way that we used to. We don't have the plastic over the furniture.
Sorry about that.
Right? So there's not these different cultural cues that we can go to every week or after church or during the holidays. What are those cultural cues and moments within the idea of Black beauty and what is Black is beautiful that we are passing to the next generation? And what are we asking them to do?
I'm gonna let you go because I'll kick off. I mean, I think the Black church is gonna exist forever. Now, how you get the kids to go, though, that's another question. But I think for me, growing up in the Black church was a crucial part of, sticking with it, understanding what spirituality feels like, and even today, 55 years later, it still feels just as good. I think there are, again, these outlets like the jazz music. I think the art, being able to allow them to express themselves, whether we like it or not. We know we wanted law, but they went to art school anyway. But I think being able to introduce them to Black venues like this and Black talks by Black people is really interesting, but also introducing them to these worlds of these white worlds as well, because you don't know how Black you are unless you've existed amongst the entirety of the world.
So what would you tell them to do tomorrow? And then I'm going to ask you to say, what action? I always like to leave with some words of wisdom of action.
I think the action word for me has been care, which is it's got discipline in there. It's got the understanding of humanity in there. It's looking out for the next person. It's the each one teach one. It's, your 12-year-old, you got to look out for your 6-year-old brother. I think care is.
So what would you say to that next generation? What should they be doing and what action?
So like your word care, I think my word, I said it earlier, is kinship. Form ties that bind. Mm-hmm. Form ties with people who remind you who you are. Form ties with people who help you be a better you and be a storyteller. Curate and collect the stories of yourself, the stories of your family. One thing my grandmother always told me was to be a good ancestor. And that's about thinking forward. Plant trees under whose shade you will not sit. You're doing it for the next generation, and know that you're helping others become culture literate, beauty literate, but also literate about what's next. So future literate. Read Octavia Butler.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you both, Cheryl. Now let's give them a hand. Bring New back up. Our host.
I don't know what else to say.
Q&A or no?
No. No. If you have a burning question, take it, fold it like that piece of paper, and hold it close. The answer is within you. Because we want to have time to convene and talk amongst ourselves. So if you do have a question, we're here. Thank you for joining us as we kick off this wonderful weekend. Thank you to our wonderful panel. And we're going to hang out for probably like another hour or so.